And for more, let's cross to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Philip Naylor teaches history at Marquette University, co-editor of the Journal of North African Studies. Thank you so much for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you very much.
You heard in that report that wording by the head of the military, himself a veteran of the Algerian War of Independence there, he's talking about the army taking pride in being part of this defiant nation. What should we read into that?
Well, it's hard to read the military sometimes, and I think what Gaid Salah was referring to here is that the army is being patient. However, the worry that we all have is that how patient will the army continue to be? So I think he's kind of signaling several messages here. One, the question of patience. Two, the army will not necessarily tolerate a long-term or a series of protests. So we'll have to see what happens with the military. The military, of course, is the key to this situation right now.
Philip Naylor, when we talk about Algeria, I have to ask the question: who's running the country right now?
Well, it's probably the oligarchy around Bouteflika. It's called the pouvoir, but it's an oligarchy which has been really in power, one could say, since the days of the revolution from 1954 to 62.
So they're right now holding out in the face of what are the biggest protests since 1988 in the university protests, right?
Right. They're holding out, but that isn't. But I don't want to suggest that there's unanimity among the oligarchy. I think that they have to come themselves. The oligarchy certainly has all sorts of vested interests throughout the country, economic interests. We have corruption, and so the protests are not only against Bouteflika running again, but certainly against the whole system that has been in existence for so long.
So where does it go from here? Can at this point in time, and we saw especially last Friday, a sea of humanity in Algiers and the other major cities of the country?
Well, the letter that was promulgated yesterday by the oligarchy basically called for a national conference. Right now, you have in the Constitution, Article 88, which says that if the president is incapacitated, the president can be removed. There's a process. The process would be that the president would be removed. You'd have the president, the Council of the Nation, which is also called the Senate, would take over. There's a roadmap that could appease the protesters if the roadmap is actually followed, if the Constitution will be followed. Constitution has not been followed. This was certainly telltale in 2008 when Bouteflika ran for a third term. A third term was against the Constitution. So we'll have to see what happens with regard to the constitutional aspect of it.
Are you surprised at that this protest is happening now? For so many years, people said that, well, because of the years of civil war, Algeria didn't want to return to bloodshed, and most Algerians would just kind of stay out of politics.
Well, I think that you have to look at the protest as not only being a protest against a fifth term for Bouteflika. We're dealing with an economy that is in serious trouble. It's a rentier economy based on hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbon prices are low, as we all know, and the result of this has been a serious reduction with regard to social services. The idea of protest, by the way, should not be necessarily just centered on the fact that you've had these massive protests. Protests have occurred constantly throughout Algeria for years, dealing with infrastructure, dealing with electricity, water supplies to neighborhoods. So this is not necessarily just a phenomenon. This has been going on.
It's been going on, but we haven't seen anything of this scale. In fact, we didn't even see anything of this scale, Philip Naylor, when there was the Arab Spring back in 2011.
Oh, that is correct. I mean, this is an opportunity for the Algerian people to hopefully gain some reforms. So we'll have to see again how this will all pan out. But it is a very, very dramatic event, and a dramatic event which has serious strategic consequences with regard to the Sahara, the Sahel, Morocco, Western Sahara, and Tunisia.
Algeria is the only country on the continent, Philip Naylor, where you have this political party. You mentioned le pouvoir, the powers that be, basically who've been in place since independence, since 1962.
That is correct. This oligarchy has been in power for that long. Essentially, during the war itself, you had the development of a military security apparatus. And out of that, the military would play an important role in. But eventually, as Algeria developed, you have this technocratic elites who would join it, and it is it is, as you pointed out, the powers that be. And again, the pouvoir itself feels certainly threatened, by the protests, in part because perhaps a lot of what it's been doing will be revealed.
One final question, Philip Naylor. Outside players, most notably the former colonial power of France, staying well out of it. Could there be any outside players that could intervene either way, one way or the other, or act as mediators at some point?
Well, France is worried. Spain is worried. Spain in particular, receiving 50% of its natural gas from Algeria. No, Algerians basically are doing things themselves. I don't see any outside player coming in, intervening, or offering good offices. Nothing like that. The Algerians take care of themselves. In a recent book by James McDougall, he characterized the Algerian people as being resilient. They are resilient, and they are certainly, I think, he's determined to finally see some tangible reform.
Philip Naylor teaches at Marquette University. Thank you so much for joining us here on France 24.
Thank you.